Go to the fair.
Ooh.
Go to the movies with friends.
Game night with friends.
Game night.
Sonic, because there's other cars
Sonic.
looking at you.
Thrifting. Howdy.
Hey guys,
What's up, y'all?
welcome to The Couch, an Office of Spiritual Life podcast. Today, no guest, just us.
Wow.
We're talking about dating. Pretty cool, pretty chill.
I don't know if you were in chapel on Monday this week or if you were at the Q&A last night with Dave and Ashley Willis, but y'all sent in pretty much over 100 questions, which thank you for that. And obviously we did not get to all of those questions last night. And so we are doing a part 1 and 2 about sex, intimacy, dating, everything in between with the three of us. Between the three of us, we all dated at ACU at different times and in different ways. We all have different sexual pasts, and we are all currently married with different marriages. And so we bring something to the table, some different opinions, interpretations that we would just like to extend to you, and hopefully maybe you benefit from some of our experiences that we're going to share through the questions that you have already submitted to us.
Cool.
So I'm excited.
Me too.
Great.
I have no idea what everybody's going to say. So.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of these questions. I couldn't be there at the Q&A session with Dave and Ashley
Boo.
because I have a good excuse. It was my wife's birthday.
And that's a good spouse.
And they would have wanted me to be with my wife.
True that.
Dave and Ashley, I mean.
Oh my. I mean, I also would have that. But yeah. Okay, just to clarify how we will be answering questions today, it'll be among the same standard of how Dave and Ashley spoke about dating and sex. And so I'm just going to define the two real quick. Dating, how they decided to
Describe it.
thank you. I was going to say define it, is two people pursuing one another exclusively, physically, spiritually, and emotionally to evaluate if they are a lifelong partner or not. That is dating. So it's a very intentional experience, spending time with a person. Do we concur?
No.
Okay. Wow.
I mean,
Hit me with it.
it's not that I say, oh, I hate that. I just don't think dating requires that amount of pressure.
Great.
I say that I dated girls in undergrad where we just went on a few dates. We weren't exclusive. We were just
So let's go broader. Spending time with someone to see if you have a connection.
yeah.
Regardless of the
explicitly
connection.
Romantic time. Not that, I mean, like a Sonic date is still a date.
Yeah.
Whether or
for
not
sure.
you're going on a Sonic date with someone else the next night.
I mean, we also are in Abilene, so like Sonic sometimes is as good as
Sonic's
it gets
pretty
for
hype.
a first date.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So spending time with someone to see if you have a connection. That is dating, going on dates. And then sex, we wanted to make sure we made the disclaimer last night. And we're going to use some pretty vulnerable words this next 2 podcasts. But that sex is not just a penetrative act or intercourse. It is all sexual activity. That includes oral sex, foreplay in any way, shape, or form, or anything that includes an orgasm or nakedness would be sexual activity. That is sex for our discussion that we will be having on this podcast. So yeah, just want to make sure we're clear on those 2 things.
Are you good with that one, Nathan?
Yes.
Great.
No comment.
I plead the 5th. Okay, so I would like to start off with a really practical question that a lot of students asked is, how do you know someone's the right one when you're dating? And maybe you can talk to more that maybe they don't have to be the right one to go on a date. How do you know someone is God sent? So how do you keep a spiritual component while still not having a lot of pressure when you're trying to figure out, like, how do I know how someone's the one or how to date someone? What are the qualities you look for?
That's a loaded question.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
We're going to try to keep it short and sweet.
Like the first thing that assumes is that God or scripture informs dating specifically.
Right.
Because I mean, we can scour our Bibles. People weren't going on dates in the Old or New Testament.
They were not.
Just not how it works. But scripture does tell us how to treat people, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it tells us, how to work with the Spirit to discern, what is the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. Romans 12:2.
Yeah.
Okay. Shameless plug for our theme verse for the year. And so when I was dating people, honestly, I'll be totally honest, and I was not the best person to always go on dates with in undergrad. I was kind of flighty. But I wasn't thinking, man, I kind of want to go on a date with this girl. Do you think God put her there for me?
I think that's over spiritualizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a good term. Not to say that there are not two people who God puts in each other's lives who have an incredibly fruitful life together because of God's actions. I think it is so important for couples, whether they're dating, engaged, or married, to recognize the way that God is working not only in their lives individually, but in their lives together. But I don't think you need to put that kind of spiritual pressure on a dating relationship, especially if it's new and fresh.
Yeah. I would say some helpful determiners in this process that I used is my mentor used to tell me growing up, check your peace meter. Where there is the Lord, there is peace. I think the Lord is in every person because God created every person. I also, I don't believe in a soulmate. I do not believe in fate. I believe who you choose becomes your soulmate because it's based off commitment to unconditional love. And so that becomes who you decide to stand with at the altar and promise your life to.
Yeah.
Determining factors for that. Fruits of the Spirit. Is that person kind? Joy, peace, patience. Do they have good self-control? Are they gentle and tender? Another really cool quality that someone told me growing up is how does someone treat, if you're on a date with someone, pay attention how someone treats a waiter or waitress. Or how does this person treat strangers? This doesn't mean they're God sent, but it shows, do they have fruit of the Spirit and of God in their life, even when you do not benefit from it?
Yeah, are they caring about the people around you, or are they just like, I'm just trying to cater to you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to
good.
be nice to someone you like.
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to finding the one or whatever, I agree with Avery. It's a choice you make to who you're going to choose to love and commit to for the rest of your life. And when it comes to dating in the sense of, I think going into dating, if you haven't spent time in God's Word and spent time thinking about what are the qualities that God has for me in a spouse, and that doesn't mean you're looking at every person that you date as your spouse, but it does mean you have this kind of idea of this is what God has called my spouse to look like. And this is also what God has called me to look like. And so you have this kind of this list, which there are some like set things in Scripture, but there are also things where I just believe the Holy Spirit convicts and puts on other people's hearts that I'm sure there were things on your list that were different than things on my list, things that were just important to me. And then is there fruit in their life? Are you able to see fruit without having to ask if there's fruit? There's a difference between what I try and tell people is, are you having to ask them all the questions about their faith and it just feels like they're saying the right things? Or are they willingly talking about it and how the Lord is working and moving in their life? Or are you not even having to talk about it because it's so evident? And when it comes to God sent, it's an interesting thing for me because my wife literally was God sent. And that's a whole story. But in just how he brought her to me. And it was just all divine place, divine time. Like looking back now, it's just like God's hand was over it all. But in the first time that we went on a date, I wasn't like, oh, is this girl the one? No, I just thought she was cute. And I was like, yeah, I want to like go out with this girl, see who she is, get to know her character, get to know who she is, how she's here. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to marry this girl. But I didn't have to ask her about her faith because her whole story was wrapped up in how the Lord had brought her here and how she is doing her best to be obedient and faithful.
Yeah.
And that was date one in Monks at the table closest to the door where the sun was shining perfectly through the glass on her rosy red cheeks.
Yeah, that's a great segue into the next question because someone asked, at what point, how did you realize you were each other's persons? That was a question for Dave and Ashley, but I think this can kind of help create the dialogue around right person for us specifically. What stood out to you about the person you're now married to? Or when did you know?
Yeah. I joke with Leah,
his wife,
my wife. So I am not going to give a survey of our dating history. Long story short, we started dating freshman year and did not date all through college, but ended up finding each other again our first year of grad school. Got married a year and a half later. But I was in Market Street with my friends freshman year. Leah and I had just started dating. And I look at my friend and I'm like, hey, I'm just saying, come back in a few years, I'm married to this girl.
Oh.
And I didn't feel that. I didn't feel that way with anybody else. And I dated people in between dating Leah. And there was just something different. I couldn't explain it. We just got each other.
And I think a disclaimer that I'd love for you to speak on during this story, there has been questions about like, how do you know the difference when you do have that kind of intense, that it's not lust or just attraction that feels very blinding and like, this has to be the person. Was there a difference for you?
I mean, yes, I think. It's hard to tell when you're 18 years old.
Correct.
Coming out of a
100%.
Conservative space. Like, maybe sometimes you just don't know. But what stuck with me was that feeling lasted through not being together, through getting back together, through being married, and now in less than a month being married for 2 years. Like, I still look at her and think, I'm going to marry that girl. I already did, but it's hard to trust feelings that like there may be nothing more exciting than going on a date, coming back and talking to your friends and just being so giddy about how well it went. Like, that is so exciting. I love that feeling. But there's something so much sweeter about looking back 4 years from when you first felt that and saying, I still feel the same way. So discernment is not a, let me think about this right now. Right. How is this going? What am I really feeling?
Yeah.
It's about consistent, continual reflection.
Yes.
That's good.
So good. So good. And that is the same for boundaries, communication, intimacy in marriage. It is constantly you. It's a spiritual discipline to constantly return to the conversations you had been having or want to be having and saying, how are you feeling about this? What are you thinking about this? How can we continue to improve with one another? That's good. Mace.
Can you read that question just one more time? I was just loving what Nathan was saying.
I know.
Sorry, guys.
The first question is, how is someone the right person, quote unquote? And we kind of affirmed that in ways, but also expanded on that. For Ariana, what were the qualities in her? I know you kind of already touched on it, But when did you know she was the one and why? Let's go with that.
Yeah. Man, I feel bad, but like my memory is pretty bad. Like I just don't have good memory, and so when it comes to like dates and times, Ariana is elite about remembering this is what happened, this is when it happened, and all these things. And for me, it's like just over the time we spent together, I remember her walking down the aisle of Chapel on the Hill for me to pray for her knee. And my first thought was, dang, where's this girl been? And then I was also like, okay, like focus up. And so then I didn't really think about it until later that night. And then texting her, and I was like, okay, I just want to go out with this girl. Just want to take her to coffee. Get to know her story, why she's here, what brought her here. And in the whole span of time we were at Monk's, I discovered that she was going to be an RA. She had an RA class at 4:30. She didn't tell me that, but I knew that because I was in res life. I look at my phone and it's 4:50, and I was like, oh well, she's already skipped the class, and I'm really enjoying my time with her. And when I dropped her off after we left Monk's and dropped her back off at like the library, I was just like, dang, there was something special about that girl.
Yeah.
And she is different than any other girl I've been on a date with. And I had been on coffee dates with, I think it's easy to go on a coffee date and talk with someone for a couple hours. I just think that's really easy. If I went on a coffee date and we only talked for like 30 minutes to an hour, I was like, yeah, this probably ain't going to work.
So that was kind of an indicator for you.
I was like, okay.
Natural conversation.
But it was the conversation and the depth of conversation. Whereas other people, it was like learning about certain things like their family or this and that. But that whole conversation was so focused on, this is how God has touched my life. And this is how he's continued to touch my life, and how he's continued to work in it. And and then I finally built up the courage when I knew I was that nervous to ask her out on a date, because I was never nervous to ask a girl on a date. Like, it was easy for me. But when I was that nervous, I was like, okay, this girl is like legit.
Yeah.
And so I knew within a couple months, and I told my friends before we spent 3 months apart. All that 3 months was confirmation that I was going to marry her. And when she came back, I told her I was going to marry her.
Yep.
But in that span of first couple months, I told my friends, I was like, there's no girl out there like her. I don't care like what past she has. It doesn't matter, because like I fully believe in like Jesus' redemptive work, and that today and for the rest of her life is like, it doesn't matter what she did yesterday. And so I knew that it didn't matter what hurt she had, what pain she had. I saw the character that she had now, and her heart for the Lord, and the supporter that she was. And supporting me, even though we had been talking for a couple months, was huge, because I knew I needed someone who was going to really support me.
Right.
Especially just in the career path I'm in, of just a lot of traveling and different things like that. And so I knew within a couple months, and told my friends that I was,
well,
she's the one.
You even saying being able to see someone as a child of God, and that like the unconditional love, you can see it and you're going to choose it, also is showing the other side of this, of like when you're ready to be committed to someone. Because that is so much of marriage, because you end up having baggage and brokenness in your marriage that is constantly having to be redeemed. And so that's not even just a past thing. That is a current and future thing. And so that's also just an indicator that Mace is somewhat ready. I'm not going to say you were fully ready, because I don't know. But
I don't know that
your heart space, you're never fully ready, because you never know what life holds. But my story's not as romantic as theirs. I hit 5 years of marriage in April.
Praise God.
Yes, praise God, seriously. My husband threw a gum wrapper at my head at the second week of school here, and we didn't date for a year, but we were best friends before we dated. And I will be candid, I don't believe in fate, But the second I laid eyes on Victor, before I even knew him, I was very, not mesmerized in a sexual attraction way, very curious about who he was as a person. And I just always wanted to be around him. And I've always said this, my family can vouch for it. How I knew Victor was the one is I claim I could be invisible the rest of my life and watch him from afar and be content. I don't need to benefit from him. I don't need him to be a certain person. Just his existence is fulfilling and enriching to be able to witness. And I just think that that's very powerful. And then I did not want to say I love you until we were engaged. That word was thrown around growing up. I'll get into that story later. And Victor did break this rule, but it really was powerful to me. And I think that's when I like verbally told myself, I think this is the one. It was the first time we had like an annoying bickering day dating. We'd been in the library, we were trying to like study for Greek, and my husband is very hyper and just very movie and all the things. And I just was getting quite annoyed. And I was like, oh, this is like not a fun day. And it was raining, it was in January, and he drops me off at Dillard. And he goes, I know I'm not allowed to say this, but I have to tell you now because I think you'll believe me. Like, I love you because it's not based off emotions. I'm telling you this on a bad day. Like, it is about me choosing you, and you have to know I'm choosing you. I was like, dang, okay, you can say that. Because that was so good. I didn't have to muddle through, oh, it's just because it's a romantic moment or it felt right. He was genuinely choosing in that moment. And that's when I was like, okay, love that.
And you saying that, it reminded me of the day that I was like 100%.
Okay.
And I was in Florida for a camp, and we got finished probably around like 11 p.m. And so I get on the phone with Ariana, and I see that it's been a very hard day. And we're talking, and I'm up until like, we talked for hours. I was up until like 2:30, 3 a.m. I had to be up at 6 a.m. the next day for camp. Guys, are you dedicated to your woman and like willing to lose sleep for her? Real talk. That's a sign.
Or it's an obsession.
Fair. I mean, I am very obsessed with
fair.
Ariana. And after that conversation, a very hard conversation, like a lot of her past hurt and pain came up. It was like the sign where she was, for the first time, fully vulnerable with me, to where I was like, yeah, I can marry her now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm content to marry her. And then from that moment on, that was in June, for the rest of the summer, all the way until August 14th, I literally said, wow, I just can't wait to say those special 3 words, because I didn't want to say it. I didn't say I love you to any girl before because I wanted to save it. But in that moment, I knew it was okay, and I didn't have to wait until I got engaged. But I didn't have to wait until I saw her. And I joked about, I was like, I just can't wait to say those special 3 words all summer. And it sounds so corny. Guys, I'm like, I love love.
Love kind of makes you corny, though. I'll give you that.
Yeah. You know, I love that y'all have such great I love you stories.
Well, I was about, so that's one of the questions.
Oh, it is?
Well, I'm glad we're all saying this, and I want you to share, because it is the answer is, someone said, when do you know how to say it? When should you say I love you, and how long should you date to be married? We all dated different amounts of time.
Yeah.
And we all said I love you for different reasons in different moments. And so there's not a one way here.
Yeah.
It's more about your heart posture.
Yeah.
My point.
Yeah. So because of our discontinuous dating history, non-congrual, I had said I love you the first time Leah and I dated. It was reciprocated. But it was just like, we were in a car hanging out. It was like snowing outside. It was really sweet.
Oh, snow.
And I was just like, I just love you. You know, in my 19-year-old blonde hair self. But then when we broke up, I never fell out of love with Leah. I tried to. I tried very, very hard to. Avery was walking with me through some of that. Because I was like, okay, if this isn't going to happen, I have to move on. I have to. And so I tried really hard, but I never lost those feelings. And then we get back together. We're in grad school. We were hanging out at my house one night with my roommates, and I was driving her back to UP, Shout out Res Life. She was an SRA.
Let's go.
And literally, she's hopping out of my truck, and she goes, "All right, good night, love you." And I was like, "Gotcha! Oh, you are so in for it. I knew you were gonna say it first." I just threw it in her face, and I was like, "But lol, JK, I love you too."
But lol, JK.
But it was like,
oh,
it was so
natural.
natural,
Yes.
so
Mm.
underwhelming, and it was just okay. Just bear with me. It was a foretaste of what our lives would be like together.
Yes.
Just natural,
Yeah.
unanxious.
Yes. And I feel like
It's so funny.
in some ways your I love you should reflect the life you want to live together. Because when you love someone, it's saying you choose them regardless.
Yeah.
Even in friendship, this is not connected to just romantic relationship, and I think it's beautiful. I've had lots of hardship in my marriage, and so I love that God gave me that I love you in that way because I get to constantly refer back to it. And same to you.
Yeah.
That is so you and Leah. It's so reflective, and so I think that's something to think about as you're like, oh, I know I'm choosing this person. I feel this way. I think this way. I'm embodying this. What do I, how, when people are like, oh, how do I do it? Do something that's reflective of you as a couple.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
can
Okay.
be
Wait.
sweet.
Ariana made such a bad dad joke.
During the I love you?
No, it was like we were just sitting in the car about to go back in my house. And this was after we hadn't seen each other for a while. And we're finally in the car. And there's this lady that keeps like walking around. She's just like stretching. And so we were just like making dad jokes about the different moves that she was like stretching while she was doing. And she says one, and I just look at her and I was like, dang, I love you. And she just like starts bawling, but, and says it back. But it was just like the perfect moment. I was just
Yeah.
like, gosh, I love your dad jokes. And I was like, I love who you are.
Yes.
It's not like, I love you for this. I love you for that. I love
you.
who you are.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't want you to change because I choose, like you were saying, I choose to love you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what it's about.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is it someone that you're willing to choose to love?
Mm.
Yeah.
So
That's
good.
that's I
That's
think
why I
it's
wouldn't
really,
throw it around.
It's really important to, while love is a feeling, love is more importantly a decision, a daily decision.
Daily.
Yeah.
Like it's not like we wake up every morning with this overflowing sense of deep, intimate love
Right.
with our spouses. We may. Mace has only been married for 2 months, but marriage, relationships are hard things that only work when both people wake up every day and say, I'm going to choose to die to myself
Yep.
and love my spouse better.
Yes, so much of it's surrender. I mean, looking at scripture, I so wish it was in the first person when Jesus is living, because I'm like, I want to know in your head how you were navigating serving all these people. It's still a decision Christ had to make each time.
Yeah.
And I doubt Christ was feeling it when there's 5,000 people tugging on him, wanting something from him, and yet he's continuously serving, surrendering, listening,
I mean,
being
when
vulnerable.
the entire world abandoned
Abandoned.
him,
Exactly. Still.
and he said, like, I love you.
I love you, dog.
I love you, Dom.
Right.
Okay. To answer the second half of this question, I need to ask you guys a question.
Okay.
And this comes straight from Friends, the TV show.
I've never seen it.
Never seen it either.
Well, you don't have to have watched Friends because I have only watched the first season or first two.
Okay.
When two people get back together, does it start over or does it pick back up?
So I am also like Nathan. My husband and I were broken up for a month in college, and Nathan walked with me through that. And Victor, my husband, he was kind of stuck in the middle there.
And often at the same time, I was with you guys
Right.
during that.
Oh, gosh, I think it picks back up. Ooh, that's my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's mutually exclusive to one or the other. Because it depends on the boundaries and the expectations of each person.
I don't really have an answer here. I never broke up with Ariana. I also
Better than us.
We get it. Perfect, Mace.
also when I dated others, I I don't know. I never thought my relationship with Ariana was never to the point where I was like, I'm not leaving you. I don't care how hard it gets.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't even married yet, and that's like I already just knew.
Yeah.
With others, I was like, yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that like explicitly blunt, but I just knew we were done. I was like, yeah, there's nothing here. So like I have no desire to be with you now, nor do I want to be with you again later. And
Yeah.
when you figure it out, like
Right.
I'm gonna keep looking forward.
Yeah.
And so I just don't have
Yeah.
I don't really have an answer there because I don't have an experience.
Yeah.
Which is totally fair.
I like to think of it as it's prorated. Like, like obviously,
It's like a scholarship.
we have grown, we grew and changed in the times that we weren't together. So there's a bit you gotta catch up on.
You upgraded.
Yeah. We upgraded.
Went from the iPhone 15 to the 16.
But like at the same time, it's not like I had to relearn about her family and what's important to her. And because I'm trying to that question of how long should you date before you get engaged, there is not a single answer.
How long did we all date?
3 years.
6 months, 6 months, 1 year. So 2 years in total.
So y'all got
spread out over 5 years.
So y'all broke up twice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then almost got back together once, but didn't.
Yeah, I think mine was 7 months officially dating.
Yeah.
But before we even officially like dated, we were already pursuing each other dating, but there was cultural reasons why we weren't dating yet.
Sure.
And so officially 7 months, unofficially I think like 10.
Yeah. But Leah had been, because when we weren't dating, we kept trying to be friends. And that doesn't work when you both have feelings for each other. And so we had been in each other's lives for 5 or 6 full years before we got engaged. While only we got back together December 23rd of 2019 during COVID.
December 23rd. Right before Christmas.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. So I'm not going to tell the whole story, but we were at a friend's house, and our friends were like trained not to leave us alone together.
Trained like dogs.
And they all actually they just had to go to separate rooms for like literally 5 minutes. And in that time, we had a conversation where we're like, I really miss you. And then the next day went on a date. And that next day was December 23rd. The day after our date, she went home.
Did you get her a Christmas present?
No. We actually agreed that we wouldn't get Christmas presents.
Yeah, that's probably smart.
But she did get me a birthday present, which is in January 26th is my birthday.
But that's a month span of time, so it's okay.
Yeah. And then we got engaged January 29th of the following year. So just over a year continuously dating before we got engaged. And then 10 months later got married.
Okay. We're going to pick up the pace here for sake of time. We're going to do 1 or 2 more conceptual and then kind of rapid fire some miscellaneous practical questions that were sent in. What is one topic about dating that you think isn't brought up as much as it should be? I'm going to start. It can be simple. It can be conceptual. I think specific Christian cultures, pockets, are hyper obsessed with your physical behaviors during dating. So much so, we do not talk about emotional and spiritual boundaries to have when dating. And we only focus on physical, which is not a good practice, exercising those muscles, because I kind of think of dating like a ratio. Or when you think of that's a stool, a 3-legged stool, we like completely cut off the physical and hyper focus on being emotionally and spiritually connected, specifically in Christian circles, because we hyper spiritualize dating.
Yeah.
And that stool is just not at all stable.
Yeah.
And I personally think you should cut all the legs evenly and you need to be assessing boundaries in all 3 areas so that your stool can stand well and you can sit on it.
Like a
Like
tripod.
a tripod. Exactly.
Hmm.
And I wish someone told me about that, especially because I'm such a deep person. I got, it wasn't my lust that was blinding me. It was actually my emotions and me hyper spiritualizing an experience
Yeah.
that led me to things that I had to like kind of undo. And so yeah, and I have some examples for that, but y'all can go ahead.
Mace, if you've got one, I'm trying to think through the wording of what I'm trying to say. It's what topics aren't brought up as much
About dating
about
that you
dating.
wish maybe someone told you or you wish were talked about more.
Man, and I wish. So I found out about this. This it's actually very similar to your tripod stool metaphor, but I had a mentor talk to me about in relationships there are 3 kinds of intimacy: physical, emotional, and spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as the relationship progresses, I think of 3 vectors moving in the same direction of those 3 forms of intimacy. They ought to move at the same pace.
Yes, exactly.
And being a young human
Probably a better way to put what I was trying to say.
is I wish that somebody had talked to me about how you grow in spiritual intimacy with someone else. My parents showed me very well how to have good emotional connections, a healthy physical connection that you don't have to hide behind closed doors. But they did not really show me how to be spiritually connected with other people. Everything that I learned was just like going to youth group and having friends who were also interested in faith. Sorry. We got noises in the background that I'm trying to get out of my head. Okay. And so like when I started dating, I was like, intimacy means physical intimacy. And as the relationship progresses, it's okay for physical intimacy to progress. But I was not opening my heart and spirit up to the other person because my emotions, I just didn't understand how to handle them, how to deal with them. And I didn't know how to share my spirit with someone else. Not saying that I'm doing a fantastic job, even in marriage. I'm still learning about what that looks like. But yeah, I wish someone had talked to me about that.
And that, like, dating is just so unnatural. Like, let's just put that out there. It's not even in scripture, so it's already, like, uninformed in some way. Like, we're just figuring it out. We're doing the best we can. And then we weren't made to have, like, these kind of holds on different parts for at least a massive long amount of time. That's why courting was so short. So yeah, that makes total sense. Mace.
I definitely agree with the both of you. What I think is not really talked about to young men is how do you respect and honor a woman on a date? And how do you respect and honor just the relationship and the progression of the 3 things that y'all just discussed? I think there are too many men that put themselves in situations that they want to be in for the wrong reasons. But then there are actually too many people that don't know that they're putting themselves in a situation they shouldn't be in.
Sure. Yeah.
Expecting for nothing to happen. and to progress in intimate ways in which you shouldn't progress. I know like strong Christian men who are strong in their faith, but are all weak in their flesh because we're all weak. They just put themselves in situations where they're like I'm just going to say this. I'm very strict on this because my dad was very adamant about teaching me this.
Sure.
Like you need to let the girl you're going out with know the plan from the start to finish.
Yeah.
And if you're dating in high school, which is a whole another conversation, which I don't know that you need to be dating in high school is mine. But you need to be letting somebody else know your plan.
Yeah.
Because then that shows honor and respect to the person you're taking out. But it shows honor and respect to the Lord because you're trying to honor each other and honor him. And I just don't think that's talked about very much. Like I run into a lot of young Christian men who ask me about dating and like, well, I found myself in this situation and I'm just fighting it. I'm like, don't put yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
And too many people are just like, well, what's the situation boundary? And it's just like, why are you going stargazing at Lake Fort Phantom with just the two of you, even though you've been going on 3 dates and expecting not to just be making out on the hood of your car after?
So what's your advice for, okay, let's say that has happened, but now you're like, I don't want this to happen anymore. Give some practicals on how do you navigate, I don't like this language, but going back or renewing the way you're spending time with one another.
Yeah. I think some good resources is if you haven't listened to Jonathan Pokluda talk about the specific idea of going back, he talks about it some with his wife, in whom they were not Christians before, had sex before marriage, stopped having sex to pursue purity. And they talk about that journey. But in this small sense of like, if you're at the lake or whatever, and you ended up kissing and you didn't want to, again, I think it's coming up with a plan and bringing in your community.
Yes.
It's not necessarily like you need to tell her friends this. It's her job to tell her friends where you are going, what you are doing. But it's your job as the man to tell her where you're going, what you're doing, and also your job to tell your close-knit community. If you don't have a community, you shouldn't really be dating because you're basing everything on your own ideology rather than bouncing things off a community like in Christian community, like not of a man and a woman, other community outside of your relationship, a man and a man and a woman and a woman. Like that's how the type of community you need to have, because if you don't have that, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And too many people don't talk about the importance of having. It wasn't until I had community around me that I was able to actually date to the best of my ability. And like looking back at my college life, my community came before I met Ariana. My community was there from the start. But any other girl I dated, it was just like me. And it's just like, it just didn't work. Yeah. And so I just think that's so important. Yep. Yeah. I don't know if that kind of answers the practical aspect of that.
I said this last night at the Q&A. Victor and I realized we'd have long study nights, and nothing good happens after midnight.
Nothing good happens after 9 p.m., people.
Nothing good, and that's a shaming way to put it, but nothing that we desired, the standards we held ourselves to, they were hard to continue after 9 p.m. So we had the rule that we were only allowed to stay studying if someone else was present. And that was a great rule. And rule sounds too restrictive and legalistic. It was a great standard.
A boundary.
Yes, a boundary that we created. I've had friends that realized, okay, horizontal kissing, not for us. We're taking it out of the equation. And told me, and I would make sure to check in with her. Hey, how's that going? And with that, it's not going to be perfect. So it also is helping you extend grace to community and honesty and vulnerability. And those are all great qualities to just be exercising regardless.
If your boundaries are only known between you and your significant other, they're boundaries that won't be kept.
Right.
And that's just simply a fact because it's like you're both weak. You both desire each other.
Right. In a good way. You love the person. Like it's natural to feel that way about them, but it's a not yet.
Yeah.
So navigate your not yet well.
In community.
In community. Okay.
I think that's really good.
Let's
super rapid fire. We will not give any explanation to our answers. Just say some questions and we'll say an answer and move on to the next.
Thoughts on dating apps?
Depends. Fine. Hinge is good.
Never did it. I think it's really cool you can meet with someone that you didn't know lived down the street. Keep checking your heart posture because people are not objectable to be swiped.
Yeah, just pursue the Lord, people. And like if he happens to reveal to you through dating apps, like my cousin has a great Christian marriage.
Yep.
But it's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody.
Okay, guys, this is rapid fire.
Nathan, that's about as rapid fire as we get.
Good. Okay, next.
In fairness.
Good date activities for a Christian couple.
Go to the fair.
Ooh.
Go to the movies with friends.
Game night with friends.
Game night.
Sonic, because there's other cars looking at you.
Thrifting. And thrifting an outfit for one another. That's goofy.
Going to church together. Lunch after church.
Amen.
Lunch after church. Midnight worship. But then go home straight
No.
after.
Bad idea.
Painting.
Paint by number. The little dot by numbers. What are those called?
Dot by number.
I'd say just go on walks.
Yep.
I mean,
Lunsford
I did so many walks.
Marriages. Let me just say that.
Walks just make marriages. It doesn't even have to be the Lunsford.
No,
but it's safest in Abilene around the Luns. Yeah. So be safe out there, people.
Okay. What's your take on praying together during the dating stage?
I have heard people say that they're not okay with praying with their spouse, and I think that's so silly. Pray with your spouse. Pray with everybody,
okay,
you know.
You're saying spouse, but we're specifically talking about like boyfriend, girlfriend.
Yes. I think 100% you should pray with your boyfriend or girlfriend.
You can.
You should.
Okay, so you're saying it's prescriptive. You are saying should.
I'm saying should.
I'm saying you can, and I'm saying if it feels too spiritually intimate for you, because if that is clouding your judgment, truly, because this sounds silly, but there's some charismatic prayers that know the right thing to say. I think prayer is a fabulous spiritual formation and discipline. But I think how you pray does matter. Hot take.
Sure. I'm all for Sermon on the Mount. I don't think that those people standing on the street corners or in the synagogues heaping up empty words as the Gentiles do are really praying.
Okay.
I think it's...
Nathan thinks you should pray. I say it depends. What do you say?
I say be smart about it.
Yeah.
Because I think spiritual intimacy can lead to physical intimacy.
Yep.
And again, it goes back to putting yourself in the best situation. You don't need to be praying long prayers together. But if it's something you care about, pray before your meals. Or pray quick prayers over each other. But I just draw the line on long prayers. They can lead to things that if you want to pray for them, go get in your prayer room and hop on your knees and pray for them.
Yeah, and it's, if you are not praying for the person you're dating, that's wrong.
And another thing, are you praying with your friends?
Yeah.
If you're only praying with a significant other and not praying in community with other people, take a look at that.
Maybe think about it.
Are you praying with or are you praying for?
I'm saying...
I think that's also...
I'm saying both, but we can all say for.
Yeah. Okay, next. This is specifically for y'all. How do you know if a guy likes you or is just friendly? If you date a guy like Mace, it's going to be quite clear because he's not going to mess around and he is direct, which is good.
Yeah, I just ask.
But, yeah.
So the question is, from a girl's perspective.
How do you know if a guy likes you or is just friendly without asking?
But this is
I know.
frustration for me.
I know.
Why wouldn't you ask?
One, you shouldn't have to ask is my point.
Unless they're obviously unsure.
Right.
But there were girls that had no idea.
Let me put it into perspective for you. I've talked to many girls on this campus that are afraid to engage with guys because one, they engage with a guy and then it becomes sexual and they don't know how to get out of it. Or
Okay.
they engage with a guy and actually can't tell. That's when the asking comes in. I think this is more of a fear-based, I'm not wanting to get in a situation that is hard to get out of.
Okay.
I have
don't know.
thoughts.
Okay. Go ahead.
I don't know if that's helpful clarification.
My thought is all to the guys. Just be clear. If you just want to go get coffee and talk to someone, say, hey, I want to go get coffee with you and I want to just get to know you. This does not have to be an official date, but I
Right.
do want to go spend some time with you. Also, ladies, if a guy's asking you to coffee, he is interested. He may not want to be like, he doesn't want to put the pressure of a date because too many women say no to dates, which is true. And too many guys are really fearful about asking a girl out. It is very terrifying for a guy to ask a girl out because in today's world, so many girls do say no.
Well, and
Right,
so
and
Which it is
rightfully so.
helpful if a guy is clear with what he's wanting. Like a guy is interested if he wants to go out to coffee with you. He's interested in at the bare minimum getting to know you. Now,
yeah.
women, be smart. If he's like, hey, it's the first time we're hanging out, and he's like, hey, do you want to go to the lake and look at the stars? Just say no. That's just a bad idea.
And then respect the no.
Yeah.
I would say that's another thing, though, is I think that is what's at play here is people are trying to be less direct because they're fearful of rejection. If you are fearful of rejection, I do not think you're ready for a relationship to a certain extent. Part of being in a relationship is having to learn, so not have it all together right away, having to learn the ability of how to handle when you get hurt. And I would say another good indicator on, is this person worth my time dating, is how they respond to your no's.
Mhm.
How someone handles rejection says a lot about them. And rejection's a very intense word here.
Yeah. We need to move on to another rapid fire question because these
Right.
are getting more long form.
We're
I just want
getting
to
more
say
and more.
That one is a very loaded question.
I just want to say, I don't want anybody listening to or watching this to feel like I'm afraid of rejection. That means I shouldn't date.
Right.
I'm afraid of rejection and I'm married.
And that's a question we'll get to in the part 2.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
maybe that's a question that we can unload a little
Yeah.
bit more later.
But I do think how someone handles your no's and your boundaries says a ton about them.
That does.
Yes.
But simply having the
100%
fear that someone might reject you
Yeah.
is just kind of innate in our anxious
Yes.
society.
Yeah, I think
And how you navigate
every
it
guy
matters.
has some amount of fear.
Yeah.
Okay. How do I get past the talking stage? Talk about it. Be direct.
Yeah, DTR.
DTR. And okay. I shared this the other day with a friend of mine on campus because she kind of asked me the same question. I think for people who fear rejection or don't want to be direct, something that is always helpful is approaching something with curiosity and creating open dialogue because then people do not get defensive if they feel like they're put on the spot.
That's
Part of
something
someone
Ashley said
wanting
too.
to be direct is actually the fear of not wanting to put that other person in a corner, which is very fair and understandable. So it's saying, hey, I've really been enjoying our time together. I'd love to know how you feel about it. How do you think it's going? And then saying, thank you for sharing, mirror what they said so they know that they heard you. And then say, I would like to take this to a more serious or exclusive level. How do you feel about that?
And it's
Make it a
okay for
conversation.
either person to ask that question.
Absolutely.
I am of the opinion it's okay for either person in a relationship to ask any of these questions. To
Yep.
ask out on
I
a date,
agree.
to plan a date.
Men deserve to be pursued too. Absolutely.
I mean, marriage is the pursuit of both ways.
Both.
so
Absolutely.
My sister-in-law proposed to my brother.
there you
Actually,
go.
without telling us. It was a whole thing. We got a call on Christmas Eve that my brother was engaged.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna stop it. There's just so many.
Okay, one more.
questions.
Just one more question, and then we
Yeah.
got to be done.
Okay. How do you stay calm during the process of dating?
What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure.
Okay, then answer this question. Not to put you on the spot. It just applies to you. and it applies to me. I've had clinical depression for a very long time. How do you navigate a dating relationship with one or both of you struggle with anxiety or depression? That's a loaded question. Let's try to keep it.
Yeah.
Just some
So,
encouragements to end us.
full disclosure, I have an unspecified anxiety disorder that I was diagnosed with in high school. So anxiety is just a part of my everyday life that I'm always trying to work through and understand better. It is something that affected my dating relationships, affects my marriage, in such a way that I can't just like go into a situation and know that I'm gonna feel all right in it. And I am constantly thinking about I can't show my spouse my anxiety because it might make them anxious too, despite
Mhm.
my wife does not feel the same way
Right.
as I do. And so it has required very, very upfront communication of me saying, hey, this particular situation makes me very anxious. This happened in dating. Crowds, large crowds make me very anxious, which you don't need to have an anxiety disorder to be anxious
Right.
by large crowds.
Amen.
And we as a couple have handled those conversations poorly in the past. And we've handled them really well. But each of them was started by me as an anxious person having to overcome some amount of anxiety to tell this person who I love
Mhm.
very, very deeply, I need your help in this area of my life. I do not need you to be the sole comforter of my anxiety. We have a different person who does that. Jesus Christ.
Whoop.
But as someone who also cares deeply about me, here are the ways that you can comfort me, that you can be helpful in situations where I am feeling very anxious. And that's not going to look the same for me as it's going to look the same for any of you.
Right.
But communication. Sorry, I could have summed that whole thing up and just talk about it. Don't.
Yeah.
Anxiety has so much more power
Yeah.
when you don't talk about it.
Yeah. And I will say, Nathan and I are married with anxiety and depression, and so our spouses have committed to helping us with this. It is different when you're dating.
Yeah.
This is hard, and it's okay if your partner is struggling with their mental health, and it feels like it's all on you. That's something to talk about and discern who you're trying to be to one another, if this is a good match. But I would say for depression, I mean, there's times in my marriage that my husband has had to brush my teeth and wash my hair for me because I can't get out of bed, to be totally honest. And that is one of the most ashamed, vulnerable places to be, but also some of the most powerful places. And so letting someone in on your depression, but then I would say if it's specifically your partner that has the anxiety or depression, they cannot think you are the sole
Yes.
caretaker of them. That is not healthy.
Yeah.
And that is not fair. And so you also, the person who is not struggling with their mental health, have to have boundaries. And the person who is struggling needs to respect those boundaries. And that's something that my husband uses that analogy that I can like sink the boat. Too much water's in the boat. And that just kind of became our code. He's like, okay, the boat feels like it's sinking for me. Being in like painful, dark spaces is hard for him. And that's my indicator to reach out to my mentor, to go on a walk and get some sunshine. And then inviting people into those spaces that are good for them. You can't force them in, but my husband would be like, do you want to go on a walk?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, yes or no. And it is my choice if I would like to be in that. It was only his responsibility to ask and invite, not force.
Yeah. Yeah. No one is designed to be your one person for everything.
Nope.
Not even your
Not
spouse.
even your spouse.
Yeah.
My guy friends serve an incredibly different but extremely important role in my life. I prioritize my relationship with my wife more, but I need a guys' night because these guys are also an integral part of my community.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, resources, mentors, friends, church community, therapists, doctors, all of these people can be a part, can be a part of your life, but also can deeply bless your intimate relationships in your life and be a part of enriching them, holding them accountable and helping them grow and championing you. It's one of the most powerful things about being married.
Yeah.
When you have people in your wedding and people that come along after your wedding that become lifelong friends. And you can have a taste of that dating. Pay attention to your community. Pay attention to the person you're dating's community.
100%.
Yeah.
And how are you navigating that together?
Do you both have community or is it just one?
Exactly.
And if your partner is your community, that's a big red flag for both people.
Well, mic drop
Mic
at the end. Intense mic drop.
You guys, thank you so much for watching or listening and just being willing to have what can be, for many of us, uncomfortable conversations. But we are seeking to be a comfortable place to have these uncomfortable conversations.
And if we said anything that confused you or sparked your curiosity, you can always come down to our office or email us. This was just open dialogue, so not everything's going to be perfect, but there will be another episode about sex and boundaries coming up next on Disney Channel. Bye.
Bye. See you guys.